Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive paradigm shift in career strategy, one that completely rewires how we look at the job market. For decades, standard career advice has basically taught us to be compliant, right? To focus entirely on pleasing the person sitting across the table. But what if that traditional approach is actually the exact thing holding you back? We're going to explore a concept called the armor of absolute certainty and look at why shedding your need for their approval might just be the absolute best career move you can make.
So what happens the exact millisecond you stop fearing failure? I want you to actually pause for a second and internalize that question. We all know that feeling. Sitting in that freezing cold waiting room before a massive interview, your palms are sweating, you're mentally rehearsing answers to questions they haven't even asked you yet. That whole physical reaction, it's entirely driven by the fear of hearing a no. But if you could just flip a switch and turn that specific fear completely off, how would that change the way you walk through that door?
Well, the answer we find in the material is pretty profound. You become completely, utterly dangerous to the system. And it makes sense, because it turns out the traditional corporate hiring machine actually relies on your anxiety to keep its leverage. Think about it. The standard interview process, the endless rounds, the opaque salary structures, it's practically designed to test your compliance just as much as your competence. When you walk into that environment genuinely unafraid of rejection, you completely strip away their primary negotiating tool. You instantly flip that historical power dynamic right on its head. Which brings us to Section 1, the submissive script.
Let's really look at the harsh reality of the typical interview environment. We're talking shaking hands, trembling voice, pleading eyes, hoping to be liked, and just praying for validation. We have all been there, right? Staying up until 2 a.m., meticulously crafting that perfect, non-threatening answer to what's your biggest weakness. And it's usually some totally unbelievable answer like, oh, I just care too much about spreadsheets. This desperate energy puts you squarely in the danger zone. By projecting this huge need for a gatekeeper to grant you permission to pay your rent, you're unconsciously giving away all your leverage before they've even asked the first real question. It's a trap.
So let's pivot away from that in Section 2, redefining true invincibility. It's time to put on the armor of certainty.
This is where we make a violent pivot away from that submissive script. True invincibility is defined here as a state of being where a no has absolutely no power to dent your spirit. Now, this doesn't mean you magically never get rejected again. It's more of a realization. It's detaching your identity from the applause or the criticism of a corporate gatekeeper, which functionally makes you untouchable. It's kind of like an established freelance designer having a client pass on a pitch. They don't see it as a crushing personal failure, you know? It's just a mismatch of needs. The rejection just becomes a meaningless piece of data, totally separate from their actual worth.
0. That is the exact number of weapons the system has left to use against you once you stop caring about the rejection. Imagine sitting across the table from a hiring manager who suddenly realizes, wait, they aren't desperate for my approval. It is incredibly disarming. Without your fear of their no, they literally have nothing to hold over your head. And here is why this is absolutely crucial for you. The second you hit 0 anxiety, the whole dynamic of the conversation organically shifts in your favor. They go from evaluating your worth to actively trying to convince you of theirs. Let's look at how to actually apply this in Section 3, the interview audit. Check out this mindset shift. I do not need you to tell me I am competent. My decades of execution and my history of overcoming have already settled that fact. Adopting this as your unshakable internal monologue changes the game. It's this quiet, grounding realization of your own track record. Try this practical exercise. The next time you step into an elevator on your way to an interview, repeat some version of this to yourself right before the doors open. Walk into that room fully aware that your value is an already settled fact. Their opinion cannot add to your competence, and their rejection for sure cannot subtract from it. To pull this audit off, you need a massive behavioral shift. We've got to look at the stark contrast between acting like a suspect in an interrogation room versus a high-level consultant evaluating a client. Picture the suspect for a second. Hunched over, hands folded tightly, defensively answering questions as fast as possible, just praying they don't say the wrong thing. Now picture the consultant. They're sitting comfortably back in their chair, taking thoughtful notes, pausing to ask probing, framing questions. The consultant is there to diagnose a problem and figure out if the company is even a viable match for their solutions. That is the exact posture you have to bring into the room. So, when you're conducting this audit in real time, you're actively measuring 3 specific metrics. Number 1, evaluate their scale. Ask them something like, what are the biggest constraints on your 5-year growth plan? Number 2, assess their leadership. You could ask,
Can you walk me through how your management team handles a project failure? And number 3, analyze their vision to see if it actually matches your future. Do they have the foresight and the intelligence to effectively leverage your specific talent? By asking these high-level diagnostic questions, you prove definitively that you, the candidate, are actually the one in control of the room.
Let's tie this all together in Section 4, the Unshakable Manifesto. Fear nothing. I want you to just think about the immense psychological freedom embedded in those two words. What does it physically feel like to walk into a towering glass corporate building, hand the receptionist your ID, and feel absolutely zero fear in your chest? It feels incredibly light. It means your heart rate stays steady, your breathing is deep, and your mind is completely clear and focused on the present moment instead of catastrophizing about potential futures. And when you fear nothing, you command everything. That's the natural byproduct of shedding that fear. Now, commanding the room isn't about being loud or aggressive or arrogant. Not at all. True command is actually about the quiet gravity of someone who simply doesn't need anything from the people sitting across from them. When you drop that desperation for their approval, you naturally take complete control of your own narrative, your pacing, your energy. You become this grounded presence that people naturally want to listen to. Which brings us to the raw underlying truth of the market. They need your genius far more than you need their title. It is so easy to forget that without human talent, a multi-billion-dollar corporate headquarters is just empty concrete and powered-down servers. Corporations spend millions of dollars every single year on recruitment agencies, headhunters, job boards, and they do it for one simple reason. Capable, effective talent is incredibly scarce. You are the engine that actually drives their revenue. Recognizing this reality shifts the ultimate power dynamic decisively back exactly where it belongs, to you. Step into your power. When you really break down the mechanics of the job market, you realize the standard rules were never actually written in your favor. But now, you've got the armor. You know the exact metrics to audit the people sitting across the table. So the only real question left is this. The very next time you walk into that interview room, are you going to sit down as a suspect? Or will you take your seat as the sovereign? Think about it.